Okay, so Sister Norma, first of all, thank you so much for being with us. I cannot express my gratitude enough. I know you are very busy.
I'm happy to be here for you.
So can we first, let's talk about, I met you back in August. You guys were pretty busy during that period of time. That's when we kind of saw an influx of immigration into our country. Now, we usually see things slow down a little bit in the winter months. Have you guys seen that? Have you guys still been just as busy, or where are you at the Catholic Charities of RGV?
Yes, well, numbers have definitely trickled down. We actually, after that big rush of so many people when you were here in August, around it's October, November, that those numbers started to change because of the different strategy plans that the administration or the Border Patrol was doing, sending people back to Tapachula, sending people back to Mexico through Title 42. Also sending lateral flights to other places like Arizona and Laredo, and expedited removals to their countries in almost every single day. So numbers definitely, even though we may see high numbers of people attempting to enter the United States, they are turned around right away. And so numbers definitely are much lower than when you were here in August.
Okay, so when I know you talk with a lot of people are on, they're hopeful, but they're also kind of in a very, very tough spot. So when they're hearing all of these things about all of these policies that are put into place and that they're going to be returned right away, what are you hearing, the morale or sentiment from those people? Are they worried? Are they hopeful still? Are they scared? Because the caravan, when I walked, they were very hopeful, regardless of what was in place. They were saying, we're leaving nothing to try for something. Worst case scenario is we go back to nothing.
Right, you're very right on that. That's precisely where the families are, the people that they have gone through that journey and migrated, leaving obviously nothing back home because they've lost everything, and very hopeful that they have a chance. Anything is better than where they were. So I think that's why they risk their lives and travel so long with such hardships. And what I see is a lot of people, especially in the Mexican border cities, that are just there waiting. They actually were attempt to enter the United States. They're sent back by the United States on Title 42 because the border is actually closed. Basically, the previous administration put it in place because of the pandemic. Not only because of MPP, as one of their efforts was to put MPP in place so that they could send everybody back to Mexico. And then the pandemic happened. And then it was like a second shield that just simply was reinforced, making sure that the border was closed and everybody who attempted to enter the United States was sent back. This administration continues to put that in place and have not done anything to lift that. So everybody that attempts to enter the United States is sent right back to Mexico, or even now more so than the previous administration. Now this administration has implemented expedited removals, which means that they're sent back to their country. If they can send them back to their country, they will. And so that's why we see so many people attempting to enter. The numbers may be high and people entering, but those are people that go and they come back, go and come back, and they keep pushing them back, but they keep coming back in. And so we see high numbers. I think a great percentage of those are repeats, that people actually re-enter again and again and again, attempting to enter and with hopes that this time maybe they will let them in. And so that's the morale, as you asked, is terrible. The families are suffering tremendously at the border towns. There's thousands of them just congregating in those camps in the like Reynosa Plaza and things like that. So
Tijuana.
It is terrible, and Tijuana as well. So the situation in Mexico, because of the great numbers and people still coming to the border, as you mentioned, through caravans, with the hopes that they can still come, especially people from Haiti. You see them congregating more and more and more, and so the situation is not getting better at all. Even though the United States may not allow them to remain in the United States, we have a situation right next door in our neighbor country, and it's really sad to see that. And so something needs to change, that something needs to address the root causes so that people really are safe at home and have something to look forward there.
Agree. I mean, I think that's what a lot of people agree with. Now, I think it's interesting that you bring up some of these policies, because under the Trump administration, they were very different than they are right now. Like Title 42, for example, I have witnessed single adults not being returned several times, and those would qualify for Title 42, right? So that's interesting to see. And they don't have the ankle monitors or the cell phones, which would be the alternate to detention. So I think that part's interesting. And then the MPP is actually, I think only 7 sectors are doing it, and each one has a fraction of the amount of people they're sending back each day versus what the Trump administration was doing. So maybe the numbers are just a little bit different, or maybe they're, coming in bigger and they're being pushed out more, and we just aren't seeing that. I'm not really sure.
Well, you would have to look into who is actually not being sent back, because it is, as you mentioned, the single adults that are not being sent back. There has to be a reason why they're not sending them back. It's possible that they're from Venezuela, Nicaragua, or Cuba, countries that will more than likely they will qualify for asylum,
Right.
and that may be the reason why they're not sent back, because those are the ones that now with the MPP remaining Mexico policy, they're being put into that program. And so
and that's what some of them were, and that's what some border agents told me as well. But have you witnessed or experienced kind of an arbitrary removal at all? Because I have seen in border sectors, they'll say, okay, we're going to send out a bunch of Venezuelans back to, repatriate them. But then in another sector, they're keeping Venezuelans. So it seems like kind of arbitrary that there's not a rule right now.
A consistent process, right? Yes. I think that the administration is working very hard. At least they're trying, but they're not showing any end results as far as what is the actual policy in place, so that people know. And I keep saying that to them, please, people need to know what to expect. What are the guidelines to enter the United States? There is no clear, because people are just coming up with misinformation. And yes. Since you don't release clear guidelines and facts of what is and what is not, then others will create those facts that are false, and so therefore you're causing a lot of chaos because of that. You're causing for people to be misled and to have hope that they might be able to enter without really not have that the case, because you're not letting them in. And so I think that the clarity is definitely something that is missing, and that needs to be in place, so that we can help these families understand their hopes and expectations, whether they're valid or not, and what to expect. And so I think that the administration needs to step forward and provide that for everybody.
Yeah, the messaging is certainly getting lost. And like you said, if they're not putting it out clearly, there's a whole network of people on the other side that are using these people to their advantage. And
right, totally. They unfortunately, people take advantage of the fact that they can just create their own false narrative and say these are the facts when they're not. And so that misinformation is really causing a lot of problems. And so but yes, I agree with you that we definitely need to clarify what is and what's not.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good start. I think we need to get to the root of it, but I think getting the messaging as clear as possible, not just coming to the podium one time and saying the border is closed, but reiterating that and having those conversations maybe in the press conferences, instead of it's a really tough situation. It is. It's multifaceted. We know it's that politics have gotten involved, and nobody has wanted to really make a move on it, right? We've said these people are kind of used as a political football for the last 40 years, and they're human beings at the end of the day. And that's why you guys are there, is to make sure these people have dignity and what is going on. So
I'm very happy, before you move on, to hear that from you, because I think that's a very key component in all of this. We cannot lose sight of the fact that they're people, they're human beings, and they are being caught in the middle of all this political dilemma. And so I think that we must proceed with addressing things correctly so that we treat people correctly.
And, we do have people that have viable asylum claims that are fleeing persecution. I've sat with families and they're lovely and they're sitting there bawling because they had to leave their country that they loved. 5 grown men breaking down in tears because they want to be in Venezuela. But they say, we're here telling you our story so our children don't have to. And so, we see those people and they are lumped into all of this. And, America has really wrap this up in whatever package they want to make it. And right now, there's a lot of negativity around it. And those people are being lumped in with the masses, and they actually have a claim to be here.
You're very right, Ali, and I'm so happy to hear that you say it's not until you actually hear their stories and realize that it's very complex. It's not just a whole lump of all these people entering the country illegally. No, it's because we don't have clear pathways to understand the complexity of every single different group. And so we lump them all together as illegal aliens or people trying to enter the country massively, because we don't have clarity as to who qualifies for asylum and how can they proceed to do that. It's almost like that door is shut down and they're just all thrown together as one,
Now, when you mentioned that there's people making the journey, I know there's a lot of Haitians that are still I think they're en route to cross the Darien Gap, and the Darien Gap I learned all about as well, and something you wouldn't wish on anybody. So I know those people are, to go through that, you've got to be leaving something hard. But I've also talked to a lot of folks. I just talked to 4 Venezuelan men at the airport who said that they had not walked at all, that they took a bus, and a plane directly to America. So how many people are you guys experiencing that kind of have more of an economic claim than an asylum claim? And this goes back to the mixed messaging, right? Because somebody who's just coming here to work might have a different process than someone who is coming here fleeing persecution, right?
I think so. I think those that actually fly and never have problems are very few, but there definitely are those that actually manage to get through either buses and planes and as you mentioned. But I think that you would say they would all qualify or fall under the economic situation that they are coming because of economical reasons. But if you really start to probe and find out why is it that they are coming for economical reasons, if it isn't because they cannot work back home because of the corruption and the violence and the difficulty of what the government is causing in those countries. And so yes, it's economical, but it's also very political and very corruptive, and so all of that together kind of fits on each other, and that's why we have these massive migrations.
So when people are down, when I was walking with the caravan, sister, in Mexico, they were offered papers to live and work in Mexico. Now, they didn't want to. They said, we want to continue to the US. Some of them saying Mexico didn't take care of them because they felt like they were prisoners in Tapachula. Can you explain, from what your conversations are, kind of why that isn't a viable option? Because, there is, if it is an economic reason and they're fleeing their country, and of course, America is the dream, right? But they're getting an opportunity to work in Mexico while they wait, maybe, or can go through that process. Why isn't that a viable option for them?
Yes, that's very true. It should be a viable option, but they're afraid to take it because they feel that if they take it, that will reduce the chances of them entering to the United States, where they believe will be safer. Mexico is a very violent country. There's chances of them getting kidnapped when they go to work. I was just meeting with a local mayor from the city of Reynosa, and he was proposing that he could hire everybody with giving them a stipend or something for them to work. And I said, that's a great idea. Unfortunately, some will be afraid to go work because the corruption is there. The criminal organized crime will kidnap them because they know they can take a family or a person and put them in a stash house or a warehouse and then call their families and ask for money. I've had families tell me, my daughter, my family is kidnapped. They were kidnapped from downtown, and we've already gathered money for them twice, and they're still asking for some more. And I just simply said, don't give them any more, because as long as they have that window open, they will continue to exploit you until you say, I don't have money. And so you have to allow yourself to run the risk, what's going to happen next. So the next thing we found out, that family was dropped out in Reynosa, in Monterrey, and was released, thank God, and so unfortunately people in Mexico, if they're immigrants, they will have a high risk of being kidnapped and exploited, and so definitely that's an option. And I can see many people that I know in Reynosa that are there, they would want to work, definitely, because they want to be able to sustain themselves as they wait, but it's risky.
Absolutely. And, when I was down in Mexico, I saw some of the corruption as well. I'm well aware that it is certainly a situation. Now, do you think there's something that we can do on this side, America, to help that? I mean, there are neighbors. It's mind blowing that we can literally walk across and they can walk across basically back and forth, and there are neighbors, but there's all this corruption, right? Kind of in our backyard. Is there anything that you can see as an option that our administration can do to work with Mexico on this at all?
Well, I think that the governments need to work together more for the benefit of finding solutions rather than to address it for their own gain. I think that governments like Mexico and United States must look at the reality. If the United States is sending back people to return them, well, they must return them to where it's something safe for them, where there is an agreement with them to help these families while they are in their country. And so I don't see a lot of that happening, but I think that more work needs to be put in respect to governments to address the issues that are happening right now, and people in Mexico and why they're there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now we're talking about people wanting to work, right? That is what I'm hearing from every single person I've talked to. One man, he's from Venezuela, and he's a lawyer, speaks English. He's here now and he's working, under the table somewhere because he wants to work. He wants to be here. He's going through the process. He's had one court date, but that's the issue, right? When they're going through this process, they can't work. So they have no other choice but to stand there like this and need help from people.
Ali, to respond to that, and that is one thing that I don't understand. Our country is desperate for workers. We definitely need workers, and these people want to work. So why don't we create work visas that everybody that is on the other side can immediately be put into a process into working in the United States legally? While they're here working, they can remain here and then they can be sent back. I mean, some visa program must be done for workers program so that people will be out of the streets and taking care of themselves and solving what we need as a country. We definitely need a lot of workers, and we need people that want to work. These people want to work. So why can't we make that happen?
If it's temporary while they're waiting for their process or whatever it might be, it just seems as though if once they touch soil and they're here and we allow them in, if they're not removed, then it seems backwards to just leave them out there with nothing. I was calling it the American nightmare. You had 8 Venezuelan people living in a 1-bedroom apartment with no appliances, no food, no clothes for the baby, and they can't work legally, and they have a process they have to go through. So the visas would be a good start there to have them have an opportunity.
Right, totally, Ali. I can understand that we need to be more proactive in coming up with realistic solutions to what we're facing today in our times, and we're not. We're so caught up with this political back and forth, and so that seems to be more important than to actually address the issues that we're facing today. And definitely, it doesn't make sense to have somebody in a process of legalization and yet not give them permission to work to sustain themselves. So it doesn't.
They have to be reliant on us. They have that's counter to what they want. So with that being said, I know you guys. NGO, Catholic Charities, or RGV, has been around for a little while, but it was really expanded in a response to what was going on with the immigration across the border. So with that being said, there's no gotcha moment here. I think people are wanting this conspiracy theory to pop out, but from what I've experienced and what I've uncovered, NGOs have a government contract basically, or a partnership with the government where they're working with Border Patrol. So these people aren't getting kicked out into the interior with nothing, with no English, with no direction, no anything. That's what I have learned is the role of NGOs. But there is this frustration that the American people have, because it is a lot of times, from the Yuma shelter had explained it to me as well, that, you know, these NGOs, a lot of times, you guys I know get donations, but there is also active FEMA reimbursement for all of the NGOs. And so if that's the case, that is some taxpayer dollars, and that's the frustration. But the issue is, what is the option? That Border Patrol just releases them into the streets?
You
Like,
know,
so what's the option?
you know, Allie, you know, like the reason why we work, the people that are entering the United States and remaining in the United States to continue a process of legalization to determine their proceedings in the asylum claims, you know, they are releasing them to us so that we can make sure that they are put in a bus by their families. We contact their families and they can move on and be safe, you know, so that predators don't go out after them. We try to protect them in a safe environment so that they can get the proper connection so they can move on. And so we do this out of the goodness of the heart of the community, you know, to provide this humanitarian care to these families, because they actually are, the moment that Border Patrol once give them permission to remain because they qualify to stay in the United States and continue that process, because they, they can be sent back with Title 42 because Mexico will not receive them. And so therefore, this specific group that actually remains, which is not very large, those are the ones that we assist them. They're legally already, from the moment the Border Patrol releases them to us, they have a document that says you have permission to be in the United States, to travel to your points of destination, and they continue your immigration proceedings at that point. So what we're doing is providing them just simply a conduit so that these families don't end up in the streets of our cities as homeless and as victims of more crime, you know. And so we make sure that if they have COVID, we put them in a hotel to isolate them, to make sure that they receive the care they need to make sure they can be okay. And at the same time, they don't go around spreading COVID to the rest of the community. So we're doing our part in making sure that everybody that we reach out to help, that is brought to us, is properly cared for and continues their journey. And so we've done this with no taxpayers' money. It just happens that this year there was some funding available to reimburse all the agencies that were doing humanitarian care out of some funding that was allocated for this purpose, for humanitarian care of all the agencies or all the groups that along the border or anywhere in the United States were responding to humanitarian care. So we got, I guess you could say, got lucky to get reimbursed to some of the efforts that we've been doing for so long, you know, and so that's good. I'm glad and that is taxpayers' money. But other than that, it's really through the care and compassion of so many people in the United States that we're able to do what we do.
And when you were talking about that, you guys make the phone calls and things like that to the families, is there ever any concern that maybe they're not their family members? Maybe, you know, they're going to somebody who doesn't have the best intentions. I mean, we talked about the criminal aspect too on the other side. Border Patrol's telling me they don't really have a really good way to vet families. They basically call and make sure that it is a home, that someone is there to receive them. Now, do you ever worry when you say goodbye to these people, what happens with them next?
Well, that's a very good point. And you know, I especially myself, I'm very watchful to see whether there is any human trafficking involved in any of the families that arrive to our centers, and making sure how they behave with their children, how do they behave with those point of contacts and families where they come, to be able to identify if we can identify anyone who could possibly be a victim of human trafficking. We immediately will call Border Patrol. We will also call the consulate to follow up on those cases. And so I think that it's very important that we make sure that that whoever enters our center and follows up to move on, that as best as we can be able to make sure it is their family, you know, and we see the conversations and that they are husband and wife, there's mother and daughter, and those relationships, because we hear the conversation, because we talk to them, and so it's evident that they are. But if we at any point find anything that flags that it could be some type of human trafficking, we right away act on that.
What would be some of those flags? I mean, and this is good information for other people too, because there are ways to report human trafficking if people suspect something.
Right.
What do you look for?
Definitely, but in the behavior of the person, of the parent towards the child, if the child is the parent does not follow up and even care where their child is while they're waiting, I said, excuse me, is he really your child? You know, because the way you're behaving, you don't seem to have any interest on this child. I'm gonna, you know, so we try to identify those behaviors and really confront the person to make sure that, and we talk to the child. Tell me about your dad, tell me about this, you know, so that we can be able to know whether it is truly the father or not.
The dogs heard the door knock. No problem.
I'm sorry. Sorry, that's somebody.
No worries at all. Now, once they leave from Catholic Charities of RGV, do you guys follow up? Do you connect them with a charity where they are? When I was speaking with this Venezuelan family, they're in Oklahoma City, and I was trying to do the legwork and help them find a charity where they are. And I finally found one. I sent them all the information, and they called and they said, well, they don't speak English. And so they were between a rock and a hard place still. So do you guys follow up? Do you try to help them navigate where they're going, or what does that process look like once they're?
You know, we don't do that ourselves, but we do. They follow up with us many times. We've had staff that will call and see how are you doing, and many of them will say, well, I haven't been able to find my this or that, whether it's a job or whether it's I'm not sure about my immigration meetings and things like that. So we follow up with them to guide them better and put them in contact with local community services like Catholic Charities and others. But I'm working very close with other organizations that are very interested in doing precisely that, to actually and really be able to, we pass out a card that of some of these organizations that will say, call this number, and if you're going to any part of the United States, you can always ask. I'm in Chicago, and I really don't know where to go. I need legal services. I need whatever it is. This organization will follow up with them and tell them where to go in that city to be able to get the assistance that they're asking for. So I think there's a lot of interest out there in different organizations wanting to follow up in that way. And so I'm working very close with a couple of them.
Okay, good to know. I would love to hear, like, let's stay in touch and follow up on those things too. I'd love to hear. So I know that you guys test for COVID. It's right there on your door. You cannot enter without having a COVID test. So outside of COVID, because if someone tests positive, they have to quarantine or are recommended to quarantine. So outside of that, a COVID positive person, how long do you guys care for a person or a family? How long are they in your kind of care for?
Well, we keep them there from 5 to 10 days, depending on because we continuously test them again until it tests negative. So sometimes it could be several days, you know, but after the third day we'll test, and because sometimes if they test negative within 3 days, we will then retest again to make sure it's not a false COVID negative, and so therefore they could stay there for a while, you know, because we will let them stay there as long as they need to.
So what about a family that doesn't have COVID? That's just a normal family that didn't test positive. How do they stay for a couple of days, or what is that duration?
Not at all. Our only interest is to facilitate for them to be able to continue their journey safely. So we put them in contact with their families so that their family can pay their travel arrangements, you know, and once they get that, they off. So less than 24 hours, they're out already on route to their destination. So some may take a couple of hours, some may spend the night, but it depends on the family's turnaround to be able to come up with their travel arrangements.
Now, I mean, it's not outlandish to say there are some people that just cannot afford a plane ticket. There are some people now, how does Catholic Charities help with either a bus ticket or a plane ticket? Because you have got to get them to a destination. Is there an agreement there? How does that work?
No agreement. We definitely encourage for the family to be able to come up with that ticket, that transportation. And so we'll wait to make sure that that happens. If we start paying for tickets, and everybody's going to need a ticket, nobody's going to be able to come up, because more than likely the families are borrowing the money to buy that ticket. And so they need to make that effort. And so we really definitely encourage that. And pretty much if we end up paying any tickets, it will be because maybe less than 1% of everybody that we get, very few peak cases that we will definitely follow up and get somebody to sponsor that family, but that's how we do it. We usually get almost 100% of people paying their own transportation.
So you bring up sponsorship family. I've had a lot of people ask how they can help. So that's part of this too. How can people be a sponsor if they want to?
Well, for one is calling us and asking us how they can be able to help, and whether it is sometime. There may be some cases where the family does not have a place to go, and Border Patrol release them to us, but we need to make the effort to find a sponsor, someone where they could go and continue their legal proceedings somewhere else. And so sometimes there are churches that step up and say, sister, if you have a family that doesn't have where to go, we will be able to sponsor them. So the whole church actually takes that family, they put them up in an apartment, they help them make sure that they're cared for, they have what they need, they show up to their hearings and things like that. So that's always necessary to have so that if we ever have a family that needs that. And usually it's families that are from Africa, from places that they don't have. This is the very first time they're coming to the United States, and they don't have anybody. And so that's when that comes in handy, but for the most part, everybody has where to go.
Mm-hmm. Now, how much does Catholic Charities have to put aside for each person? Because do you think it's $10 a person that comes through a day? Do you guys have a breakdown of how much you allocate,
That's interesting. We don't have that,
Okay.
It's because we basically just operate with a lot of donations and a lot of, we do purchase things that are necessary. They're essential, basic things like toothbrush and toothpastes, or maybe underwears, because we have to buy underwears because we don't always get them donated, and certain items that cleaning supplies. So it's hard to say how much is really allocated per person. It's just a general operation of the center that takes into consideration to be able to be there to receive the families, whoever's arriving, that is brought to us by Border Patrol, and carry on. And so some days may be more, some days may be less. So I really don't have a breakdown per person.
Now I know people are going to want to help and they're going to want to donate. So can you give me a ballpark? What does it take to operate? How can they, it's then,
well, one of the things
that's not free, obviously, but you guys get,
we definitely need to pay everything to run that center, from the electricity to cleaning supplies to basic things, everything and anything. If it's not donated, we'll fill in and be able to provide that. So somebody that wants to help out, they can help out by sending items through Amazon list that we have, so that we can be able to help. And then also for sure sending us checks to create a fund that will provide for the expenses that come up to make sure we can maintain the operation of the place.
So definitely a lot of ways people can help. Now, you guys obviously had to expand into Gilberto's a little bit, you guys, because when I first got here, you guys were on the corner and you've expanded a little bit. Is that part because of COVID? Is that part because you're seeing more people? Is it just more space to be able to operate, or what was the need to expand if numbers have been going down?
Well, we actually didn't necessarily expand because we've had that location as is since the very beginning that we acquired it. The only area that we expanded to was across the street for a warehouse so that we could put things that were donated to us. And so it freed the space that we had instead of filling it in for warehouse space, it was for the services and the families were getting. And so across the street, we were able to secure this space so that we could put all the donations that we're getting, and from there easily bring them to the center, because it's just crossing the street.
Yeah. Okay, good to know. So now I was looking on your website, since 2015, you guys had helped 23,000 people. Now I'm assuming that number has jumped because you guys have been busy over the last couple of years. So how many people have you helped? Do you know over the last year?
Oh, over the last year, that's a good question. Since 2014 to today, we've gone over 200,000.
Wow. Well, I don't know what I just read on your website then.
And it's not updated, unfortunately we don't have somebody that does that, and so we might need to update those numbers.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing, how many people you guys have been helping, because I think that that's indicative of the influx and drop as well, because people, they just see everybody coming across the border and they're not seeing people in the fragmented pieces that are staying, right? They're just seeing a big group of people. So
that's a very good point. I think that's something we can definitely update our website to give that information to the general public and show how many people we're helping every year, and the total since the beginning. So yes, I agree with you. I think we can do something there.
Awesome. And I don't know if you're able to, this is a question I know I'm going to get from people. Can you tell me how much the grant allocations were for you guys? I know you said you got lucky and that is a huge blessing. Can you talk about that at all? Or is that something that you don't want to share?
No, I don't mind. I don't know the exact numbers right now because we actually still talking, because the reimbursement is not 100% given to us yet. It was just something we submitted to. I think it was like we have requested like a little bit over $1 million, and but I don't know that we've received it 100%, but yes, it's possible that we could even get more, but we're working on that.
Okay, wonderful. Is there anything else, Sister Norma Pimentel, that you want to share with me, that you have updates on, anything that the public needs to know that's happening in RGV right now?
Well, I think that it's important to know that that today and since January to today, we still see our borders definitely closed. In general, people are allowed in only because Mexico is not allowing them to return them, like they return almost 100% everybody, with the exception of families with children under the age of 6. This is who Mexico has refused to take back. So because of that, those are the families that we see in our center. And you walk into our center today, you'll just see a lot of kids, because it's families that have very, very tender age kids. And so pretty much, I think that when we hear about the high numbers of people entering our country, we shouldn't panic, and we shouldn't think that the border is not closed, that it's out of control. I think our law enforcement men and women are wonderful. They're doing their job. They're controlling who enters our country, and it's just that our country needs to have more clarity as to the processes that are in place, so that people are aware of it and they know what to expect. And so if families don't risk their life as they're doing so by being in Mexico.
Now, when you say the border is closed, obviously kind of a hypothetical, because there's big holes in the border everywhere that the people are coming through, right?
Oh, they do. No. Let me correct that. Yes, people do cross into the United States. We have a river, and you have to do is walk into the river and get to the other side. And there's not holes. I mean, the wall doesn't make any difference. People do cross over. But Border Patrol does apprehend. They apprehend.
But now, is there any concern or have you guys talked at all about how Border Patrol doesn't have the staffing and the manpower to do their jobs anymore? That's how the 7-year-old Venezuelan girl drowned. One of the Border Patrol agents was angry that they weren't able to save her because they were inside processing people, because there's so many people. So it doesn't seem to match a little bit there.
No, I think that the Border Patrol thankfully has received a lot of funding to upgrade their capacity. I think the previous administration definitely did that a lot. And I'm not sure about this administration, but I think they do. I'm sure they always welcome as much more that they can get, because definitely they need to be staffed correctly so they can do their job, even better. And because I think that it's unfortunate for the drowning of that Venezuelan woman, but it's not the Border Patrol's fault or anybody's fault other than the fact that our failed immigration process, because that person should have the right to enter legally through a point of entry and declare that they were they needed asylum, instead of risking their life into a river that is very dangerous, that even though it appears it's not, people are drowning, and it's not fair for them, and so thank God that our Border Patrol sometimes makes the effort to reach out and help that individual that is drowning, but it's not their fault. It's not because of like a manpower. It's because of the fact that they're risking their lives and throwing themselves into a river that they could very easily lose their life, and they have. And so it's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you think there's some danger in this situation with Border Patrol? Like for what I've experienced and what I've witnessed, I'm learning that I witnessed at least 130 single adults be released at the airport, and it's happening every single day, and it has been for months. Now, that's a message that's going to get out as well, right? And so is there something that the administration needs to be doing in that space to kind of reel that in, or what? Because they're all talking to each other, just, the messaging is getting out there. So if they're saying, oh, we got to stay, is there a danger of that door being brought wide open, that everybody's just going to flood over because single adults are also able to stay right now?
Well, it depends who it is. They're not just being dropped in great numbers at the airport. If they get to an airport and they can be able to fly, if they get to that point where they have a ticket and they can fly to any part of the United States, it's because they have already been cleared.
So these ones were dropped off by ICE, and I'm learning that they are camping out at the airport because they don't have tickets, a lot of them. So they're dropped off by ICE on a bus.
Right, but in order for ICE to be able to do that, they cannot release them to an airport, to our bus station, unless they have a NTA, a notice to appear. They must have a immigration process in place for them to be released. If they don't have that, they will not be released, because then they're releasing them without any responsibility. So Border Patrol, ICE, any of those entities will not release somebody. It's like, for example, we dropped off a young man at the airport, and he was not allowed to get on the plane. So I got back and I talked to Border Patrol, and says that person is not with us. And so then we went to ICE, and he was there. And so he said, why did you not let him get in the plane? He had an NTA. He had a document that stated, I have a notice to appear before immigration office, a judge in Philadelphia. And so it was wrong that they detained him, but because that's precisely what they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to allow anybody to move forward unless they think all their documentation is in place correctly. So they're not just dropping off people without any process. They have to have a process in order for ICE to release them and give them permission to travel. And so even though they don't have a ticket, the best thing would have been for the immigration ICE officer to drop them off maybe at our side or any other shelter that will guide them to get that ticket, so they can end up and get that ticket to get into an airport correctly. And so that's where the flaws are, because this person then is outside without the means of knowing. That's where we come in. We try to provide that assistance so this person doesn't find themselves homeless or out in the open without knowing what to do. There's a procedure to follow to help them make sure they're safe and they can safely get into a plane or a bus and continue their travels. And so but it's not, this is how I see it. They're trying to do their best to do things right, and so unfortunately they have these little things that are not quite ironed out.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the NTAs right now, they're on an OR, so it's an own recognizance. So do you guys, when you have people that are at the NGO, do you help them explain the importance of showing up for these court things? Because we know that only about 50% have, that's the latest stat from DHS. And so when they have an own recognizance, right, that's just kind of Scout's honor, I'm going to show up. Do you have those conversations about how important that is? Because if
it's
we
very
have them
important.
show up, that's what people stick on, right?
Totally, it is totally important that they understand, and we do have attorneys that come daily to give lectures, orientations, and charlas, so that people understand precisely what the next step. I say, attorney says, "What do you need?" I need them to know what's next. What's next for them? They need to understand that it's very important that they need to show up to that immigration hearing, that first meeting with immigration office, because if they don't, they lose every right to be in the United States from that point on. The next step that they will do, they will get picked up and sent back to their country. So if they want any chance in making it and proceeding to see whether they have a chance to have asylum in this country or a legal status, they need to proceed to follow up with their immigration notice to appear.
Mm-hmm. Now, when they go see the attorney or judge, when they see an immigration office, and if their claim is denied, say their asylum claim is out, have you had people reach out to you guys for assistance and help? Because I know it's kind of on a self-deportation level at that point, like it's kind of gotta go. Do you guys help out?
I don't think that it's in a self-deportation level. At that point, if the judge orders a denial for their claim, they will not be released. They will then be deported to their country.
I have to look into that a little bit, because I'm being told very different things from officials on one side. So I'll look into that, and we'll kind of follow up a little bit on that one. Because I just don't know how that process works.
Right. Yes, I think it I don't know, immigration has their reasons of how to proceed, but if they're released to the community on their own self-deportation, it depends on the risk factor, whether the person is put an ankle monitor or not. That's what they determine, depending on who that person is. What's the risk of them showing up or deporting themselves or not. I think that it's based on a lot on that.
Okay.
But for the most part, they will not release somebody if they're not going to leave the country on their own.
Okay. Yeah, it's like there's definitely a multi layers to everything. And I think that the biggest mistake that we're making with immigration is we're trying to take one single paintbrush down the border and say, this is the fix. And each border county has a different issue, and each family has a different issue, and each country has a different issue, and it's not easy.
You've come to become aware of the complexity of the whole thing, right? So
absolutely. Good. I mean, that's my job and my responsibility to you and to people and to everybody as a journalist. So thank you again, Sister Pimentel, for taking the time. When I'm back in McAllen, I would love to sit down with you in person, and I'll circle back on some of these things. And if you have any details that you found that you've come across, shoot them my way. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ali.
Take care.
Thank you for being I appreciate a journalist that is really clear with the facts and not just trying to be biased on their own personal viewpoints of something. I wish all journalists were like you.
It's called objective, and it's actually what a journalist is supposed to be. Good, bad, or indifferent. It doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't.
I was asked to give a journal, a group in New York of journalists in a university to a session, over Zoom, and all these young journalists. And I said that one point, you need to be objective. Don't take sides, please. Just take the facts.
Get out of the business, because now you're not a journalist, you're a commentator, and you're part of the problem. You're dividing. We need to come together. The only way through it is together, my friend. So that's what we've got to do. We've got to meet in the middle here.
Muchas gracias.
Okay, gracias. Adios. Bye-bye.